Hi, Jane here. Thanks for joining me again this week. This week I want to talk to you again about writing stories. I want us to talk about some benefits of letting the story lead you where it wants to go. Now, just the topic of writing stories is very broad. You're painting with a broad brush there. But I really believe that everybody has a story, probably many stories, but you at least have one. Now, those of you that write or that want to write, do you ever feel saturated with stories that just kind of seep up from nowhere inside you? And you may want to work on one, and then all of a sudden something else comes up, and you have stories everywhere. I know people that I've worked with people who are like that, and I can do that sometimes. I think everybody can. That's not super uncommon. But how do you manage all of that? What do you do with that? How do you keep the creative flow going and your sanity? Well, there's a lot of time and effort spent training and talking about the mechanics of your writing and good writing practices. Writing tips are everywhere on the internet and everywhere else to help make sure your work hits all the fine points of good writing practices. And yet, here's a fresh thought. Are you sure your creativity doesn't fall victim to formula rather than flow? So my question for the day is, how do you walk that fine line between controlling the story through your formula and letting the story tell itself as you follow along, writing it down? Now, I believe that if you get this down well, you enter a new level with your writing. Your stories come alive at a deeper level. The results can be amazing. So, I think in writing stories like this, we come to a balance. We have to strike a balance between form and creativity. Uh, Ernest Hemingway said that we're all apprentices in a craft where no one ever becomes a master. I think that's just so true of writers. It's just true. There is no one way, the perfect way to write correctly, and when you write like that, then you're the master of the writing universe. No, sorry. It does not work that way. You can take any one story and tell it countless different ways, different styles, different everything. So he's right. We are all apprentices. And in that, I think you have to accept, I think you would agree if you're a writer at all, that writers are learners. They're readers, they're learners. You're an experimenter, an explorer. You're bold seeker of what lies just outside the circle of what you can consciously know and see. Just around the corner, there's probably a story just waiting to take you someplace special, show you things you've never seen before. Stories do that. And stories are an adventure for the writer as well as for the reader. I think that's something that sometimes gets overlooked a little bit. Now, I don't say at all to throw form and function out the window. You still need to hit all of the elements of good writing, whether it's, from style to grammar and all of the things. Your story needs to have all of your storyboard, your storyline, your plot, your characters well developed, your locations well researched. Everything needs to be done behind the scenes like that. That is incredibly valid. And yes, you want it to be very well finished off, like a finished carpenter finishes the millwork in a home. But that's not exactly part of the creative process. It refines and helps the creative process. The creative process is getting that story out. It's getting it to a rough draft. And that first draft, some people never get to that first draft. They never get it finished because of all the things that happen while they're working on it. What starts out as a creative flow ends up in a bad place. Now, when it comes to writing, I know through my own experience and through experiencing my clients' work as well, um, writing stories is much more than just those technical points and getting it all right. Your story is an entity all its own. It breathes, it lives, it breathes, it longs for freedom of expression. It wants to be told. And I think you have to recognize that. Uh, you know, people close to me, if you know me well at all, my friends all say, "Oh, Jane's the planner. She's the organizer, the builder of structure." I function like that. They would be correct if they said that. But when it comes to writing, um, there has to be, you can't let that control your creativity. It'll come into play later. It's great editing, it's great for refining, and it's awesome to have a plan. But when it takes a creative space for to set your story free and let it go into its own telling. And that form, that structure that you're taught becomes the scaffolding, if you will, to take you up where the story leads you or to take you down where the story goes. It's to facilitate the story, but it's not the story itself. Now, in order to write like this, to follow the story where it leads you, it's a writing practice, in my opinion, to learn how to release control of the story. What is that, and why would we want to do it? Well, that sounds scary, releasing control. I mean, why would I want to do that? Well, let's first talk about what I mean it's not. This is not what I mean it is. You are not going to throw structure and good writing practices out the window. No, that's not what I mean by releasing control. Editing is going to not be done away with. It's going to be done at a separate time, and so is revision. Revision is just virtually always a must. Revision and editing, they're givens. I mean, you're not going to sit down and write a first draft of a book and send it to the publisher. It isn't going to happen. It just isn't going to happen. So that's what I'm not talking about. Releasing control of the story really means that you just loosen up some. Relax your mental grip on it. Holding it too tightly, holding to form and structure, it's got to be perfect, it's got to be, man, that just gives space for your inner critic and that inner judge to just come out and have a field day with you. I mean, they go from little whispers in the back of your mind where they're just screaming in full voice, and you let that go unchecked, and man, they'll have you in the weeds killing you off. Your story will never get told. The draft will never get finished. You're sidelined. You'll be stuck in a swamp of writer's block, or you just give up on the project altogether. That critic will come at you. The judge, they'll hit you on all sides. They'll come from, "Oh, the story is stupid, this isn't worth telling, you're not doing it," to, "Well, this, what you could have said this better. Well, I think you should have capitalized back that." You know how that just that biting little thing just nips along at your heels the entire time you're writing. This writing practice of letting the story tell itself elevates you out of that and puts you in clear territory where you're just free to let the story tell itself. You just go there. It's an amazing experience. It's fun, but it's learned. Now, turning the filters down, turning the filters off like that, how do you do that? I'm sure you realize we have a conscious mind and we have an other than conscious mind, and we have imagination down in there. Now, when you're writing just simply through your conscious mind, I'm not talking about academic writing. There are some things that the story, if you want to call it that, the message itself is a very mental message, and it needs to come through up here. But even at that, there's still an element of humanity in that you're writing this. So imagination can still be part of it. But for the person writing a testimony, a piece of fiction, good nonfiction, how to, whatever, to release control of it and to drop down into the imagination, your imagination is it's a marvelous gift that we're given. It's a paint box. It's a sculpting tool. Your imagination is a dreamer, a builder, a storyteller, and so much more. You are incredibly creative in that place of imagination. And so that's where your story actually lives. It's down in there. You have to let it out. You have to go places with it. Act on its invitation, if you will, to come experience all that it has to offer and to show you. Well, that sounds kind of out there. I can hear some of you say or think, and I suppose that maybe, but writers, I think most writers are part of that company who do go there. You're creative. You saturate yourself in your story. Get into your research and your notes. Live in it. Ponder it. Meditate it a lot. Bring it up and think about it all the time. Take a day sometimes. If you have errands to run or someplace to go, invite your character. Let your main character come alive, or some character that you're wanting to research a little bit. Let them come alive. Take them shopping with you. What do they see? What do they like to buy? What are they thinking? How do they respond in your atmosphere? Let them become real to you. They'll tell you how they think, how they feel. You'll become so intimately acquainted with them that then when you go in and you begin to write, it's it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Now, something that you need to think about, I think, is it's like when you go in and you let your story tell itself to you, it's kind of the difference between a person being in a bank during a robbery and reading their account of it, listening to them tell their story, compared to what's written up in the police report of the event. The police report is the facts, and just it's surface only. It's just the facts. There's no emotion. There's no depth in a police report. It's just, this is what happened. This is when it happened. This is who was there. This is what was taken. Blah. Signed off. That's it. The first-hand report, that person remembers it like it happened just 5 seconds ago. They'll tell you what they were wearing, what they were doing, where they had just been, what they went to the bank for, where they were standing, what they thought when the guy came in, on and on it goes. It's alive in them. Your story is like that. And when you let your story tell itself to you through your imagination and throwing all the judgment and criticism out the door for a while, ooh, you get a depth of story and character and interest that that's different than what comes filtered through your conscious awareness, through what you're thinking. You may have the plot all lined out, you may have a storyboard, however you work. You know your outline, you know in your head where the story is going to go. But when you let the story tell itself, you may find that some of that changes, that the story will tell you things. Your story knows things about it, and it has secrets that you don't know. And it'll show you things, and you go, oh, that's a cool plot. Oh, we're going to do that rather than what I had planned. That's part of the excitement of doing this. So what are the benefits? There are probably thousands of them. I just chose 7 main ones because it kind of hits the basic points. And I'm just going to go through this real fast because I know you probably think I go on too long. Your creative flow is greatly enhanced and increased. It's just the truth. Your story emerges in new depths and dimensions. Like I said, changes come forth that elevate the flow of the story, make it more interesting, more intriguing, more whatever you're after. When your story tells itself, it shuts down that inner critic and judge, and you write freely. It produces rich and very easily edited first draft. That's huge. It's huge. It meets the reader with at a higher level of relationship and readability. You've read those books that they just capture you, and they're page burners. You just I can't wait to the next page. Were they going to write another book? Some of that, a lot of that. Some of it can be style and their talent at getting everything to flow, but a whole bunch of that is getting the story out in a way that just hooks you. That comes out of the story more than anything in my experience. And this practice teaches you it teaches you new perception and some new writing skills. And just that ability to know when you're working out of your conscious mind and when you're working out of your imagination. When you start becoming aware of that and really using that as a tool, that's invaluable to you. That's invaluable. It will help you when you get into a stuck place. Drop into your imagination. Make sure that recognize where you are, and I guarantee you 99% of the time you will have drifted up into your conscious mind or into your outline or whatever. If you're stuck, drop back down into your imagination and let the story talk to you. It's amazing. It's amazing. So you have to keep your balance. That's the sum total of it. Keep the balance. Yes, you want to maintain, you want to keep your plan, you want to keep your research and your notes, you want to do all of the things that we've talked about doing to keep yourself organized and to make the natural part of it very fun and effective for you. But you also want to drop into your imagination and let your story really tell itself to you. I'm sure this topic will come up again as I was working through this. I just became aware of more and more. So I apologize for this video being a little bit longer than the others, but there's just a lot to say, a lot to share. Thank you very much for joining me. If you need any help with your story, of course, as always, please contact me. You can just go to my website and there's a spot there where you can email me. Subscribe to my blog, subscribe to this channel. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll get back together next week. Thank you. God bless.